Hi, everyone. Last speaker, hopefully you're still with us and that I can keep you engaged. When I was in my second year of university, our journalism professor gave us what was an unusual assignment. He said, I want you to spend a day in someone else's shoes and document it. And if you know anything about journalism, we interview people from all walks of life. And to do our job well, we need to be able to put aside our opinions, our judgments, and our beliefs about a subject and immerse ourselves in someone else's opinions and beliefs and judgments. And so this exercise was to help us develop that capacity to empathize. So I was about 20 years old, middle-class girl, born in Canada, grew up in a small, well-off suburb on the edges of the capital, lived a pretty easy life. And suddenly, for a day, I was a new immigrant, dressed in a traditional Middle Eastern gown, with a headscarf covering my hair, and I got onto the bus and did some errands, pretending that I spoke very little English. My immigrant accent is not so good, but I made an effort. And it was really hard. It was probably the first time in my life that I genuinely felt insecure, excluded, different than other people, where I felt at times humiliated, certainly humbled. And a simple thing like buying a tube of toothpaste became so complicated, let alone trying to find a job, that by the end of the day, I kind of wanted to curl up in the bed and not engage with anyone. And it gave me this profound respect and appreciation for the strength that these immigrants have when they try to integrate into societies that are often rejecting them. And so I want you all to just stop for a minute and imagine that for yourselves, what it would be like to be that person. That exercise of imagining was the purpose of that exercise, but was also and has become really a driver for me in my career as a journalist. Since then, I've traveled to shelters for displaced people in Syria, to drought-hit villages in Afghanistan, to communities in the north of Sudan that are all but neglected, to Libya in the days following the uprising. And this career, what it does to you as a person, being exposed to all these different perspectives on a regular basis, it changes you. It teaches you that you shouldn't jump to conclusions about people, first. But secondly, that at the end of the day, no matter what group someone might be part of, people are just people. And I remember in Libya, these rebels, as they were known internationally, they were pretty much university students, like probably many of you in this room today, wearing flip-flops and jean jackets and getting thrown off of their feet when they launched a rocket-propelled grenade because they'd never done it before. These weren't war-hardened criminals. They were just kids who wanted a better future for themselves and for their country. And I think that exercise of imagining what it must be like can help our societies in a big way. Despite that universal humanity that I see in my job as a journalist, our world, as we've been hearing for the last 2 hours now, is obviously increasingly divided. At the community level, at the national level, at the global level, I think we all feel these heightened levels of polarization. So what I'd like to do is offer what I think is one part of the solution. The first step, as Christian outlined right off the top, to the divisions that are created in our societies is dehumanization of the other. And that dehumanization depends on an ignorance of the other, right? It's a lot easier to dismiss someone, to hate someone, to kill someone if you don't know them. And the more we can create empathy and understanding about the other, whether it's that immigrant that I was dressed up as in my exercise, or the enemy on the other side of the front line, the more we can start to prevent these divisions. And as Kofi Annan said, bless him, journalism can be a big part of that. So let me give you a few examples from my own work. I'd say one of the biggest crises that face us today in the world is the perceived divisions between Islam and the West, right? And ISIS has reinforced this belief that the two are fundamentally incompatible. And a lot of that tension is reflected in this tiny little thing, the headscarf, right? This little piece of cloth that symbolizes for a lot of people this backwardness and a stand against women's liberty and women's freedom. And one of the first articles that I wrote as a young journalist was about the headscarf. And I interviewed an Australian immigrant to Canada who described herself as an atheist and as a feminist. And she was suffering from borderline anorexia, from low self-confidence. Slowly, she began to get to know Islam, eventually converted to Islam, and herself put on the headscarf. Quite a journey for someone who started as an atheist. But she described it to me as something that liberated her from what she saw as a consumerist capitalist society, right? That liberated her from our society's tendency to see women's bodies as commodities. Now, whether you agree with that or not, her rationale begins to humanize her and challenge some of these binary identities that we create of Western versus Muslim. Another example, when I was working at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in 2011, I went back to my native Egypt during the revolution there. And I, like many other young people, was very supportive of that revolution and happened to step out of the main protest square where all the other journalists were concentrated, covering the, the patriotic revolution that the young people were leading. And I ran into this old man who had no teeth and was kind of screaming at the top of his lungs about how much he loved and defended Hosni Mubarak. And he took me into his neighborhood, a really run-down place, and showed me what his life was like. And for him, this protest was costing the food that he needed to put on the table of his family. He'd been out of work for days, he was a taxi driver, and all of the streets had been shut down. It's just a simple example, but starting to understand and spend time with other people that might have different perspectives than your own makes you realize that at the end of the day, they're not all that different. And the drivers that motivate their behavior are not all that different. So today I run a news organization called Irin, I-R-I-N. It's a horrible acronym from our days in the UN. But we're now based here in Geneva as an independent news organization, and we concentrate on covering humanitarian crises, conflicts, natural disasters, you name it. We're pretty busy these days. And what we try to do is create that same link that journalism produces at the community level in helping create empathy at the global level. So we help decision makers sitting in places like Geneva understand what it's like to have their lives torn apart by conflict. And that helps them be able to respond to the needs, but also in understanding what leads people to violence in the first place, we can start to develop solutions that are a little bit more meaningful. And when you travel to places, as we do, like northeastern Nigeria, the home place of Boko Haram, and you go into the prisons and you talk to the militants, more often than not, again, as Christian mentioned, it's not ideology or values that has driven them into the arms of militant groups. It is economic marginalization or other forms of exclusion. And I remember sitting with the family of a young man who blew himself up in Somalia with al-Shabaab, and seeing the way they live in these communities with very little economic development, poor education, very few opportunities. And even if you completely disagree with it, you start to understand why someone could become a suicide bomber. So for me, building peace isn't only about stopping the violence, about these high-level peace negotiations. It's about creating empathy with the other such that we can coexist in society. Now, journalism, as I've explained, can help do that, but the trouble is it's not often happening. And today, the kind of journalism that we produce at Irin, where we try to be more in-depth, more balanced, more nuanced in our reporting, that kind of journalism is becoming more and more rare. The business model for media is under pressure financially, and increasingly we're seeing, particularly in the age of Trump, liberal and conservative media feeding to their respective audiences messages that reinforce their existing beliefs rather than teach them anything new. And if you think about our own lives, we exist in bubbles, right? Technology allows us to filter our conversations on Facebook, our friends, the information we see, to the point that there are very few channels for us to engage with ideas or people that are different than us. And this should worry us seriously. So I have two suggestions for us leaving this room today. And the first is that you, as a consumer, can proactively seek out quality journalism, the kind of journalism that teaches you something about someone that's different from you. Seek it out. It is out there, even if it's rare. Read it, consume it, and where you can financially support it, all the better. And secondly, create your own opportunities to empathize with the other. So strike up a conversation as a journalist would with someone that's different than you, and put your own ideas to the side, as I have to do in my job. And give yourself the assignment that my professor gave me, to spend a day in someone else's shoes. Whether it's reading this diverse kind of journalism that might challenge your ideas, or striking up a conversation with a stranger, stepping out of your comfort zone requires moral courage, it requires imagination, but it is essential to creating more peaceful societies. And so I encourage you to try it. It will change you as a human being. It has certainly changed me, and slowly I believe it can also change the world. Thank you.